It was 3:17 p.m. when Rebecca Walsh heard the doorbell ring at her townhouse in Charlotte, North Carolina. She glanced at her phone to check if she'd ordered anything, didn't see any delivery notifications, but figured maybe it was a neighbor or a package for someone else. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole to see a man standing on her porch wearing what looked like an Amazon uniform, complete with a blue vest and baseball cap, holding a small package and a tablet like the one delivery drivers use for signatures. Rebecca opened the door but kept the screen door latched. "Package for Walsh?" the man said, professional, businesslike, holding up the small box. Rebecca felt a flicker of confusion. She hadn't ordered anything recently that would come in a box that size, but Amazon was constantly delivering things she'd forgotten about, so she unlocked the screen door and reached out to take the package. The moment her hand touched the box, the man's other hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, yanking her forward off balance toward the doorway, and Rebecca screamed and tried to pull back, but his grip was impossibly strong. She dropped the package and used her free hand to grab the door frame, creating resistance, and she kept screaming loud and continuous, wordless terror that carried across the quiet residential street. The man was trying to pull her out of the house, out onto the porch where he could presumably drag her to a vehicle, and Rebecca realized with absolute clarity that if she let go of the doorframe, if she stopped fighting, she would be taken, and whatever came next would be worse than any injury she might sustain fighting him right now. A neighbor across the street, a retired veteran named Carl Thompson, heard the screaming and immediately ran out of his house, shouting, "Hey, let her go!" And the fake delivery driver's head whipped around to see Carl running toward them, and in that split second of distraction, Rebecca wrenched her wrist free, fell backward into her entryway, and slammed the front door shut, locking it and collapsing against it while her heart hammered and her wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed her. She could hear shouting outside, Carl confronting the man, demanding to know what he was doing, and then running footsteps and a vehicle driving away fast. Carl knocked on Rebecca's door, identified himself, and she opened it to find him standing there breathing hard, phone in hand, already talking to 911, describing a man in a fake Amazon uniform who just attempted to abduct a woman from her home in broad daylight. Police arrived within minutes, took statements from both Rebecca and Carl, and examined the package the man had dropped. It was empty, just a box with fake shipping labels, a prop designed to create legitimacy, to give Rebecca a reason to open her door and lower her guard. The uniform had been convincing enough from a distance, but when officers reviewed Rebecca's doorbell camera footage, which had captured the entire incident, they could see it wasn't actually an Amazon uniform, but a cheap imitation bought online, missing key details and logos that a real uniform would have. Detectives ran the footage through facial recognition and got a hit. The man was identified as Nathan Pierce, 34 years old, with a criminal history that made Rebecca's blood run cold. Multiple assault charges, attempted kidnapping from 3 years ago that had been pled down, and a conviction for sexual assault from 7 years ago that had resulted in a 4-year prison sentence. He'd been released 2 years ago and had been living in Charlotte, working occasional construction jobs, and according to his parole officer, who hadn't heard from him in 6 weeks, he'd been compliant until recently when he'd started missing check-ins. Detectives discovered that Pierce had been using the fake Amazon driver disguise for several weeks, targeting women living alone in townhouses and apartments throughout Charlotte, and Rebecca was the 4th woman he'd approached using this method, but she was the first one who'd fought back. The other 3 had been successfully pulled from their homes, forced into his vehicle, driven to an abandoned property outside the city, and sexually assaulted before being released with threats about what would happen if they reported the crime. 2 of those victims had been too traumatized to initially come forward, and 1 had reported it but couldn't provide enough details for police to identify the suspect because Pierce had worn a mask during the assaults and had used a stolen vehicle that was later found burned. The doorbell camera footage from Rebecca's attack was the break in the case, providing clear images of Pierce's face and giving investigators the evidence they needed to connect him to the pattern. They arrested him 36 hours later at a motel in Gastonia after a guest recognized him from the news coverage and called police. And when they searched his room,
they found multiple fake Amazon uniforms, empty boxes with fake labels, zip ties, duct tape, and a laptop with search history showing he'd been using Google Maps to identify townhouse communities with single female occupants. targeting areas where homes were close together but still had some privacy. Rebecca had to testify at his trial, describing the moment he'd grabbed her wrist, the terror of being pulled toward the door, the choice to hold on to the frame and fight rather than comply. And she credited Carl with saving her life by creating a distraction that gave her the seconds she needed to break free. The prosecutor argued that Pierce was a serial predator who'd been escalating in both frequency and violence, that Rebecca's resistance had prevented what would likely have been his fourth assault in as many months, and the jury convicted him on charges of attempted kidnapping, assault, impersonation, and parole violation, plus additional charges related to the 3 previous assaults once those victims found the courage to testify. He received a sentence of 40 years to life, and the judge specifically noted that his pattern of behavior, his use of disguises and props to manipulate victims, and his targeting of women living alone demonstrated a level of predatory calculation that warranted the maximum penalty. Rebecca installed a video doorbell if she hadn't had one already. Actually, the footage showed she did have one, which is how police got the evidence, and she changed her entire approach to answering the door. She never opens it for unexpected deliveries anymore, instead asking drivers to leave packages on the porch. She verifies all deliveries through tracking apps before answering, and if something seems off, wrong uniform details, no delivery vehicle visible, a package she didn't order, she doesn't open the door at all, just calls the delivery company directly to verify. She shared her doorbell footage on social media with a warning about fake delivery drivers, and the post reached millions of people, generated thousands of comments from women sharing similar experiences or near misses, and sparked a broader conversation about how predators were increasingly using trusted uniforms and roles to gain access to victims. Amazon released a statement after the incident reminding customers that their drivers always arrive in branded vehicles, wear official uniforms with proper logos, and never require customers to open their doors or come outside, that all deliveries should be left at the door unless signature is required through the app. Rebecca became an advocate for home security awareness, speaking to community groups about the specific tactics predators use: fake uniforms, props like empty packages, exploiting trust in delivery services, and she emphasizes that it's always acceptable to verify a delivery through the company's app or customer service before opening your door. That real delivery drivers won't be offended if you ask them to leave the package and step back while you retrieve it, and that the few seconds it takes to verify can prevent an attack that would change your life forever. And she tells audiences that the moment Pierce grabbed her wrist, the moment she had to choose between compliance and resistance, she thought about every true crime story she'd ever heard where the victim had been taken from their home and had disappeared forever. And that fear, that absolute terror of what would happen if she let him pull her outside, gave her the strength to hold on to that doorframe with everything she had, to keep screaming even when it felt useless, because survival isn't about being brave, it's about refusing to make it easy, refusing to go quietly, making so much noise and creating so much difficulty that predators decide you're not worth the risk. And sometimes that refusal, that resistance, that willingness to fight in the doorway of your own home is the only thing standing between you and becoming another statistic in a case file that will haunt investigators for years.